Good afternoon or evening, and welcome. Kensington Senior Living has 7 unique communities, 4 located in Virginia, Maryland, and New York, and 3 sister communities located in California. We are truly privileged to support care partners and professionals from coast to coast. Kensington focuses on relationship-based care built on the foundation of our promise to love and care for your family as we do our own. That promise was what initially drew me to become a member of the Kensington family, as my father lived there for almost 7 years. It is programs such as the one you're attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiver journey, to hear from expert professionals on keeping us current with the latest advances in care, management, and treatment of conditions that affect seniors and their families. Today, you are in for a treat as Sherri Snelling will share with you her journey leading caregiving, structure, and support. I have known Sherri, and I am incredibly impressed with her as an author and CEO of the Caregiving Club. All of our registrants from today will receive a copy of today's webinar in your inbox, and links to connect you with Sherri and all the amazing support groups and education she offers. Definitely purchase her books, as they are filled with advice, stories, and support. They have become my coffee table books. Please join me in welcoming Sherri. Sherri, please share with our audience a few words about yourself.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here. And thank you, Susan, and everybody at Kensington. I'm really honored to talk to you today. And what I'm going to do, if you give me just a moment, I'm going to bring up my screen because I've got lots of really great information to share with you. And I know we're going to uh, talk a little bit about the book today, but I'm going to start, if I can do this and get this all done properly. Hopefully, you're all still seeing my screen. Give
We
me a
can
shout
see,
out.
we can see your screen, and now we are at the beginning. So I'll see you after your presentation for the Q&A. Please join us for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So, as Susan said, I'm a corporate gerontologist and CEO of Caregiving Club, and I'm going to take you on a little road trip on wellness today, which is kind of the theme of my book, but just a little bit about me. So, as a corporate gerontologist, I study, and my background is in the intersection of biology, psychology, and sociology. And so, about 10 years ago or so, I started Caregiving Club. And what we do is we do a lot of consulting for different companies. We also do a lot of educational content. So we do webinars like today, we do workshops, I do a lot of writing. We also do a podcast called Caregiving Club on Air, which is all for family caregivers in the wellness space and thinking about also our well home design. And I've also been a TV producer and host and news commentator. But what I want to focus on today is what I call being an authorpreneur. So my 2 books, A Cast of Caregivers, which came out about 10 years ago, is the first book that I did. And there was a chapter in that book called Me Time Monday. And so what I've done, and it came out just yesterday, so you guys are right in time for to learn all of these things from my book. But it's a book called Me Time Monday. And it's the weekly wellness plan to find balance and joy for a busy life, which I think is probably something we're all thinking about these days. And Susan wanted me to share with you kind of how I got into this space of family caregiving and aging and gerontology. So I come at it both professionally and personally. Just quickly, professionally, I was in the tech sector, in the tech industry. And about 20 years ago, I segued into working for United Healthcare, and I was overseeing a program called Solutions for Caregivers. And it was a program that was offered to employers and also to Medicare recipients to help family caregivers better care for their loved ones through some research and referral services and things like that. I've also done a lot of research, and I worked for a time for Keck Medicine of USC. So I projects with academic experts and clinicians, particularly in the area of brain health and Alzheimer's and neuroscience and also digital health. And then I was the chairman of the National Alliance for Caregiving. I've been on advisory groups for the White House and the CDC. I was on the local board of the Alzheimer's Association. And a few years ago, I was named the #4 influencer online by ShareCare for Alzheimer's information. And I've done work helping out a new site called Brain Guide, which is mybrainguide.org, where you can get a brain health assessment and lots of other really great resources. And then on a personal side, I was a backup caregiver to my beautiful mom that you see there for my grandma. And that's me and my grandma in the pool a few years ago. And if you go to caregivingclub.com, you're going to see something called the Snug Home. The Snug Home is really a nod to my grandma because we called that pool the Snug Harbor. And you'll learn that whole story, which is about well home design. But I was also then in later years a caregiver to both my dad and my stepdad. So I have also personal connections to caring for loved ones. So, one of the things I found really interesting, and I'm going to dive now into some of the themes of my book, but I think we all know we're living longer. And in fact, in about 8 years, we're going to have more people in our country over the age of 65 than children under the age of 18. And what's really fascinating about that is that's going to be the first time in our history that that has ever happened. And so I was thinking about as I did some research, I came across this article of a family in Scotland who now has six generations living at the same time. And I thought, I knew my grandparents on both sides, but I never knew my great grandparents. And I think most of us probably have that same story, or maybe you knew one of your great grandparents, but certainly not your great great grandparents or great 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 grandparents. Think about six generations living at the same time. So when I did more research on this, I started to find even more interesting information about seven generations alive at the same time. This is a phenomenon that has only happened in recent history. And a lot of it is because, of course, we are living longer. So as I started to think about the themes of the book and do more work with the employer groups that I do a lot of work for, I really started to see the term caregiver relating to family caregivers change. And, we know that many of us out there who care for our loved ones, particularly as they're maybe diagnosed or have a disability, we don't consider ourselves caregivers, right? We're still a wife or a husband or older daughter or older son, or maybe even a sibling. But we don't necessarily take on that label of caregiving. But what caregiving is being used for now, and caregiver, that term, particularly in employer groups that I see, is to really define anyone who is caring for a loved one from a child all the way up through caring for our parents or in-laws or grandparents. And so, as I started to think about this as a gerontologist, what I do is I study aging across the life course. So I start from the womb and go all the way to the tomb. That's what gerontologists do. And we look for the secrets of what helps us be healthier and happier throughout our life that helps us live longer. And I thought, we start life being cared for, we end life being cared for. And then in between, we're forming these relationships. And they're all about caring for someone. I even saw a TV commercial the other day that talked about the caregivers of our pets. So even our dogs and our cats, we're caregivers for. But when you really think about that, we're, as human animals, we are very attuned to our social relationships. In fact, the only way we survive is through having these relationships in our lives. And so, as I started to think more broadly about caregiving, it's really across our lives. It's not a crisis that happens later in life or a situation where it's an emergency or someone gets diagnosed. It's really about just shifting now into a new caring role that might have some new things happening with it, or that we have to think about or be educated about. And then throughout our lives, the most important caregiving relationship we have is with ourselves. It's about that self-care. How do we keep, our me time and our wellness throughout our lives so that we can be those caregivers for other people that we love? So I call it Gen C, Generation Caregiver. That's one of the things in my book. But let's talk now about that self-care and that balance. And one of the questions I have for you in the audience is, do you feel that your life is in balance? And you can put some comments into the chat if you want. But I think that if you said yes, you're my heroes, because people who feel that their life is really truly in balance are truly remarkable. Most of us unfortunately feel like maybe we are balanced in some areas but not others. And certainly I think having come through the pandemic and everything that we experienced, we felt our lives be thrown a little bit out of balance. And so as I was writing the book, I started to think about this concept, which actually comes from the Native American culture and the Hopi tribe. And it's called Pawanaskatsi. And what that means is life out of balance. And it was actually a documentary that I saw when I was in an undergrad. And it was all about how much technology we have in our lives. And if you think about the fact that electricity was only created over 125 years ago, and now that drives everything, all the lights, all the smartphones, all the streaming, all the digital devices and computers and everything that we have in our lives is really only come about in the last 125 years. And if you know anything about human evolution, our bodies don't adapt that fast. We usually take thousands of years to incorporate all these new things that we have in our life. And so, one of the themes of this documentary and one of the themes of my book is that we can't abandon technology because it's important and it's progressive and we need it. But the more technology that we use, the more nature we need in our lives to create that balance that we need that will bring about that sense of calm. I mean, just looking at this image, hopefully you felt a little bit calmer after seeing the grid lines of the freeway and the big buildings and everything. We need that balance in order to really feel well and happy and find, the most joy that we can in life. So let me take you back even further. We talked about 125 years ago with electricity first coming into our lives. Let's go back 2 to 3 million years. So here we are. We're out on the African savanna. This is right when we started to become Homo sapiens. Okay, so we're still working with what we call the ancient brain, which I'll talk to you in a minute, but it's basically the brain stem, the amygdala, which is where we have emotions like fear, and also the hippocampus, where we have memories. And what we're using right now is all five of our senses to survive. So we're looking up into the sky, we're seeing beautiful blue sky. We're seeing a few clouds. We're smelling the air, so we're understanding what the weather patterns might be. We also see this mosaic of trees. And what that means is to our brain, okay, if it gets too sunny, I've got some shelter under the tree, but also if there's a predator after me, I get to up into that tree and save myself. We're also seeing the grasslands, right? And we're seeing some greenery off into the distance there. And what that tells the brain is, okay, there's food source and there's water sources nearby. So you're good to go. You're going to be okay. So all of these things are functioning in what we call the ancient brain. And what's really interesting is we have not abandoned that. That is the core foundation of what creates comfort and soothing and calm and a sense of security in our lives. So, as I take you through some of the next slides, think about that ancient brain and how do we address those five senses that give us that sense of calm. So, I talked about our amazing brains, and I'm a neuroscience nerd. I really focus as a person in gerontology. I have worked a lot in the Alzheimer's and dementia community, but I also do a lot around brain health and neuroscience. And so I'm fascinated by our brains and how they function. And that's a big part of the book too. I really dive into really understanding our brains a little bit more. And these are just some fun factoids I pulled out of the book. We have over 100 billion neurons that are being transmitted by neurotransmitters into what we call messages or synapses. And that's over 112 trillion messages that we get throughout the day, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. The other thing that's going on is you look at that right-hand side, that right-hand image, that is actually an MRI of a brain showing just the blood vessels. Now, I did some great work with some researchers when I worked at Keck Medicine of USC. And this is from one of those researchers who was one of the primary researchers in Alzheimer's. What is so amazing to me still to this day is that we have 400 miles of blood vessels in our brains. And this is why things like maintaining our blood pressure, not having hypertension become so important because you can think how tiny these little blood vessels are. And if you get a little pothole along that highway, that lets the toxins and the debris and everything come into the brain that can then sometimes become some of the hallmarks and signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. And then just from a standpoint of information, over about 30 to 40 years ago, we were processing about, anywhere from 25,000 to 50,000 words a day. We're now up to 100,000 words a day. Our brains are like an artificial intelligence or machine learning. They are just taking in so much information and processing it all the time and learning from it and building upon it. That's kind of the equivalent of reading like a 325-page book every single day. Pretty amazing, right? But what's happening is we're into overload. We're starting to get into this choice overload, and that's why we feel a little bit of stress. So, again, going back to what we're based on sense making. How do we take our five senses and how do we calm ourselves when we've got messaging and things? So, one of a lot about throughout the book and throughout these next few slides is how do use sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste to really, again, bring about a sense of calm and a sense of soothing, which again is telling our ancient brain that things are going to be okay. So I take what are the biology, psychology, and sociology, and I break it down into 7 areas of life, if you can see there. And I won't get into it today, but I talk a lot about color psychology. So there's some reasons behind the colors that I've used in my little wellness wheel here. But I'm going to take you speed through some of these 7 elements to just give you a sense of what the book's about and what I've really, hoped to help with. So, we know that this is our brain on nature. So, our stress responses are based on our sympathetic nervous system, which has the stress response, and the parasympathetic nervous system is what calms it down. I talked about the ancient brain coupling with nature and sense making. That brings us into that sense of calm. And then one of the rules, if you will, or the tools of my Me Time Monday program and workshops that I do is that simple and smaller is better when it comes to wellness. So often we think we have to take big bites or spend a whole lot of time doing something for it to really have any kind of impact or effect. I'll talk to you at the end of this presentation a little bit about that, but simple and small is the best way to go. So let's talk about the physical real quick. One of the things I love is that in sleep science, what you learn is that when your body goes into rest mode, your brain is actually going to work. It's clearing out all the toxins and debris that we accumulate throughout that day, and it's modulating our emotions. It's also doing cellular repair on our muscles that are fatigued and our joints or things that are hurting. So it's really critical that we get those 7 to 8 hours of good sleep and let the 4 cycles happen that we know needs to happen in order for all of that cleaning to go on. And, one of the things I always laugh about is if you ever were angry or had a fight with a friend or somebody and your mom said, oh, honey, just sleep on it. It'll all be better the next day. Our moms are actually neuroscientists, right? Because they knew that if you could sleep on it, it's going to help modulate all of those emotions, which are so high. When it comes to nature and sleep, one of the things I talk about is we have a lot of blue light emission in our lives. We have to figure out how to reduce that as we try to get to sleep. But also, we don't realize that sometimes the noises that are helpful for sleep, and a lot of people know about white noise. So, white noise is where you've got a consistent one sound. It might be like the fan or the humming of a leaf blower or a hair blower. That's one consistent sound. It's almost like a hypnosis, right? So a lot of us think about white noise as being helpful, but the best noise that you can use to get to sleep and stay to sleep is called pink noise. And yes, we do have sonic cues. All noises are assigned a different color that relates to where it fits on these frequencies. And I won't get into all the science around that. But pink noise mostly resembles nature. It's about the rustling of leaves, the nice lapping of waves, soft waves against the sand, or raindrops. Now, there's also brown noise, which is more like thunderclap and waterfalls. Everybody has a personalized sound that they like to kind of fall asleep to, but what we're finding is that everything from pediatrics to geriatrics, the pink noise is actually best for sleep. And also think about hearing about the latest diet fan and all that. I know that for some of you, you've heard of Dr. Annie Fenn, who does the Brain Health Kitchen and came out with a cookbook recently. I learned about her through Kensington. I went to one of her book events. But what I like to think about when we think about diet is certainly we know about Mediterranean diet is good. Mind diet's even better, which is a version of the Mediterranean diet. But I like for things to be fun. I don't like to count. I don't like to, all these complicated things, right? Life is too hectic and too crazy. So what I do is I think about the rainbow diet, and I write about this in the book. And the rainbow diet is basically, have I eaten 7 different colors today? And I always find myself, I'm usually deficit in the blues and the purples because we don't have that many foods that are that color. But it helps to remind me, oh yeah, I've got to try to get the 7 colors in, which is a lot more fun than trying to count or think about, different nutrition and things that you might need. The sunshine diet is also about nature. And this is about, a lot of people are looking now at intermittent fasting as a way to maybe help brain health and possibly even prevent things like dementia or Alzheimer's. So, intermittent fasting plays into this concept of the sunshine diet because you're eating mostly during daylight hours. And we know that our metabolism is best in the late afternoon before the sun sets. And again, this goes back to the ancient brain, right? Those folks out on the savannah weren't eating in the dark. They were eating before the sunset for the most part. And so those are the types of things that I kind of, weave into the book. Also, getting more sunshine into our diet through vitamin D is really important, and something like the Mediterranean diet, which is about, sunny climes and climates are really good to think about. And then nature's cleanse is about water and hydration. 50% of American adults are dehydrated. Now, if you're dehydrated, your brain function, your cognitive function will decline. And this is true for anyone of any age. So it's really, really important that we get the proper amount of hydration. And I talk a lot about some formulas and different things to use in the book. But a really quick one is, if you take your body weight and you turn it into ounces. So let's say your body weight's 160 pounds, you turn that into 160 ounces, take half of that number, that's 80 ounces. That's your personalized hydration plan. That's how much water, not sodas and other teas and other things, how much water you should be getting every day, 80 ounces. So that's a really quick little formula to use. Now, when it comes to the emotional wellness, I talk about the 4 hormones against the apocalypse. Those of you who know about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, they're bringing a lot of, death and disease and bad things. Well, the 4 hormones against the apocalypse is our own personal apocalypse. How are we trying to maintain, our emotions and happiness and keep everything at balance, right? So I talk about, how do you take these 4 hormones, which are feel good hormones, of oxytocin, which is bonding, serotonin, which is our moods, dopamine, which is the reward hormone, and endorphin, which is kind of our pain relief. I talk a lot about these hormones and how you can harness them. What are the little things that you can do, whether it's listening to music or dancing or other little things that you can do, just 5 or 7 minutes a day, that will boost these hormones to give you this better sense of a life and balance. And then for those of us who are aging, there's great news, because guess what? We become happier with age. Now, a lot of people think, well, that doesn't make much sense, right? Because we're facing, bodies don't work as well, things get a little harder, maybe we're not as engaged as we used to be. But actually, what we have shown now, and this is over 150 scientific studies that have been done globally in different cultures, what we're showing is that people are happiest in their 70s and 80s. Now, possibly this could be because we survived everything, right? But it's really interesting to look at what makes us happy. And I talk a lot in the book about these studies and what are some of the secrets of being happier as we age and embracing that. So there's good news for those of us who are getting older. For those of you who are younger, just know that you'll make it through, because it's all going to get a lot happier later in life. Now, when it comes to our social wellness, this is maybe the most important element of our wellness plan. One of the things that we know is that, again, as humans, we are social animals. We require other people to survive. We do not, we can't thrive, we can't survive on being just alone. And the U.S. Surgeon General came out with a report in May that showed that 1 in 2 American adults feel lonely on a chronic basis. This is now being called the loneliness epidemic. So what's really important is to look at the relationships that we have in our life And I think it's really important for family caregivers to really be realistic about who is there to support us, who gives us that break, who gives us the feelings of support that we need. And the Harvard Adult Development Study, which is the longest study that's been done on happiness and health across more than 85 years that's been going on, shows that there's one secret to living longer, happier, and healthier, and it's the quality of our relationships. Having at least one confidant who has our back, and then having a what we call the social convoy, which is who travels with you through life. So I've given you one of the charts from the book, which is the social convoy model that you see there. It's a great way, if you're a family caregiver in particular, to really sit down and be realistic about who's in those different circles, because we have different people in our lives that can serve different functions. But, sometimes visualizing it really helps us be more realistic, right? If you have a sibling who isn't really participating and helping to care for your loved one, mom and dad or in-laws or whomever it is, you can be more realistic when you put it down on paper and really say who's going to be doing what in terms of your social convoy. Now, this is my new favorite area of investigation, if you will, as a gerontologist, and it's about our environments. So this isn't about being sustainable lifestyle or eco-friendliness, even though, I'm sure some of that will come into this, but this is really about how much our environments impact our health and our happiness. And I'm fascinated by this. And so part of my book is I give you science, and then I give you stories, and then I give you solutions. So let me tell you one of the stories from the book, and it's on this visual that you're seeing right now of Central Park. Many of you may not know that Central Park was the very first public health initiative in the United States. Back in the 1850s, when it was created, it was created because the city leaders saw that we were having too many epidemics of typhoid and typhoid fever and cholera and other things. And it was because people were now living through the industrialized revolution. We were in factories, we were indoors, we were in tenements where we were closed inside tight quarters with other people, and we weren't spending enough time in nature. So they commissioned Frederick Law Olmsted to create Central Park, and they dedicated the land to do that. And they wanted everybody from the high wealth individuals, the Knickerbockers in New York, all the park that they could walk to and spend time in. And there's over 270,000 trees in Central Park. So there's a lot of what we call photosynthesis, and the chlorophyll that's coming from the trees actually improves lung function. So Central Park was actually called the poor man's lung or the city's lung. And it was all about improving that lung function and getting people moving and outside. Very important for us to think about. And now what we do is we look at our internal environments and how do we bring nature inside? If it's a view through a window, if it's certain plants that we have in our environment, and other things, again, that go back to the ancient brain, that greenery, that sense of wonder of the sky and looking outside into sunshine or whatever it is. Those are the kinds of elements that we want to bring into our internal environments that help us with mental health, but also with our physical health. So on the intellectual wellness side, a lot of people think, oh, well, is this about like lifelong learning? The answer is yes, partly. Lifelong learning is certainly part of this. We always want to be curious and, striving to learn new things, I think. But one of the things that's really important is a lot of people are interested now in brain health, and they want to know, how do I make my brain healthier? So we can cross train our brains, and it's important. We know about neck down exercising, right? We know what helps our muscles and our joints and our flexibility and our bone strength and all that. But how much do we know about what we need to do from the neck up? And so it becomes really, really important for us to cross train our brains. One of the little hacks that I have is if you go through the five senses and you spend 1 minute on each sense. So, for instance, you start with a sight. What are five things that you can see in your environment right now? You spend a minute just thinking about that. Then we go to four things that you can touch in your environment, really feel how they feel. Maybe it's, a jacket or something on your desk. And then we do three things that we can hear, three sounds, two things that we can smell, and one thing we can touch. Anyway, you spend 5 minutes doing that, you've now worked out, as you can see by this little diagram, all different regions of the brain. There's also a company that I really like. I talk about them in the book. There's a little story associated with Tom Brady, but it's all about, again, cross training your brain. And it's called Brain HQ exercises. They have over 200 peer reviewed studies that prove that there is a lot of science behind their brain exercise programs, and they're really great to do. But it's really important for us to think about how do we train our brains. And another great thing that I found is reading fiction or biographies. And the reason why is, even though I write a lot of nonfiction books, which are more informational, you can jump in my book to any chapter or any page and just read that page. But when you're reading a biography or you're reading a fiction book, you're immersed in the story. You have to follow the storyline. And in fact, with our loved ones who have early signs of dementia, that's one of the first signs. It's someone who maybe loves fiction books or biographies who stops reading them. It's because they can't follow the storylines anymore. But it's really important for us to learn of some of these techniques that actually work out our brains and give us more of that brain health. Now, from a financial wellness standpoint, I'm going to tell you another quick story. I won't read it to you, but you can read more details in the book. But basically, this is a great story about living longer. So as you see, if you do the math of the numbers up there of Jean Calment, who is this wonderful French woman, she is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest living human on record. So she lived to be, what is it, 124 or whatever it is, years old. And what was really interesting is that when she was 90, she had outlived her husband, she had outlived her daughter, and she outlived even her grandson. And so she virtually was all alone. And she was this older woman. And so she had a neighbor who was a notary republic. And she said to him, I just want to spend the rest of my life living in my home. I don't know how long that's going to be, but what I'd love to do is make a deal with you. And that is that if you can pay me a certain small amount every month, so I have some money to still eat and do all these other things, I will then gift you my home when I die. So basically, like a reverse mortgage, right? And so the Notary Republic is thinking, wow, this is like winning the lottery. She's 90 years old. Thumbs up. Of course, I'm going to do this. This is a great deal, right? Well, as you can see by the numbers, she lived another 34 years, outliving the Notary Republic. He paid her over 180,000 equivalent dollars. This is French francs at the time. And I think it's just a little life lesson on how we are going to live longer. And we have to anticipate, maybe not 124, but certainly we have to look at, our lives don't end at 60 or 65 or 70. We might have all these bonus years left. And so how do we think about that in the context of family and costs of care and long-term care and other things? It's just an interesting segue into how to think of more of your financial wellness, which we know when we have strains on our financial wellness, that it causes stress. It can cause inflammation in the body when we're stressed out, of course. And so financial wellness is a key piece of our overall wellness plan, where we have to at least know the information and the costs of care, and how do we plan for our own long-term care and things like that. Now, spiritual wellness is really important. And, I won't get into things like gratitude, which is part of spiritual wellness, which is really important. But I wanted to talk to you about music. Music really expands our souls. And it is part of my spiritual wellness piece of my book. And there are things called the Mozart effect, which is some science behind showing that playing Mozart actually improves our brain function and maybe even our intellect a little bit. But one of the things I found really fascinating is I interviewed a lot of experts for the book, and one of them was my favorite new person, Dr. Charles Spence at the University of Oxford. Now, he is a gastrophysicist, which is a whole new category of experts, and he's the number one gastrophysicist in the world. And what he explained to me are the studies that he's doing around music and our taste buds and how we can improve our eating. And let me give you an example. I tell the story about his mom who was in memory care and how she wasn't eating anymore. And he went through this whole exercise that I won't go into the details now to get her to eat. But here's what he told me. His science studies are showing that if you, let's say you're a diabetic and you have to reduce the sugar in your diet, And then the food tastes kind of bland and you're not happy, and it's easier to cheat and go get something that is sugary and sweet. What he has shown is if you play high pitched music, so this can be sounds or it can be music. So, like, think Mariah Carey or Taylor Swift. Those are high pitched singers. If you play that music while you're dining, the food will taste 25% sweeter because it's those high pitched sounds are interacting with your brain to create this sense of sweetness. And it goes back to, again, that ancient brain 2 to 3 million years ago. High pitched sounds meant that you were actually feeling and finding fruits and berries and things like that. When you use, let's take the other end and say you have high blood pressure and you have hypertension, you need to reduce your salt intake, right? Again, bland food, right? So what he found is when you play low pitch music, so think baritones like Frank Sinatra or Johnny Cash, you actually can improve the savoriness of a meal by about 38%. Now he is doing fantastic work with different companies and with airlines on the air flight, air in-flight meals and things. But I think it's really fascinating for us to start to think about the interaction of music and taste buds and dining as an important part, again, of that multi-sensory environment that helps us get through some of these things that are challenges with age or other issues that we may be having. So now to just wrap it up really quickly, because I know I'm past my time here and Susan's probably looking at her watch, but I just wanted to tell you, people ask me, what is Me Time Monday? How does it work? Okay, so quickly, you take your 7 elements of life, which I know sounds like a lot, but here's how it works. First of all, you have to define what is important to you. What is me time? And me time doesn't have to be solo, it can be social. So it might be spending time with friends or spending time, you know, doing something that's just in solitude. It's up to you. You define that. Then we say, okay, use microflows. Now, I explain microflows in the book. And there's something called flow theory and positive psychology, but it's really baby steps, right? You don't have to do something for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. You can do it for 5 minutes, 5 minutes a day or 5 minutes a week. It's up to you. But you use these simple, break it down into small, simple steps. I talk about techniques like habit stacking, if you've ever heard of that, to get yourself going. And what happens is the more you practice some me time, even in these small little increments, it sends dopamine to the brain, which is the reward system. It makes you feel good and successful, like you've accomplished something. And then third, the Monday science is really important and it's out there. We know that Monday science, culturally, it's the start of our work week or our school week, but it's also when people feel that they get a fresh start. And the wonderful thing about Mondays versus an annual, New Year's resolution is you have 52 Mondays in the calendar. So if things went haywire last week and you didn't get much me time, guess what? You get to restart this Monday, and you don't have to practice it on Monday. People say, well, do I have to do it on Monday? No, Monday becomes your day to check in with yourself and make the plan. It's like, okay, I have a pocket of time on Thursday. That's when I'm going to read a couple pages of this new favorite book, not a chapter. Again, baby steps, just a couple pages to keep myself going. And just getting those little small moments and planning every Monday, it makes Monday become like this kind of exciting day where you feel like you've accomplished something and now you get to do something new. And then you look at those 7 different elements to try to figure out how to bring that balance back into your life. So with that, I'm going to just say thank you so much for listening. I know I went fast and I gave you a little bit of a preview of everything, but I want to turn it back to Susan for questions from our audience that we can answer for you.
I'm speechless. I've never taken so many notes at a presentation. There was so much valuable information that you shared with the audience and so many great takeaways. And I encourage everybody to ask a question if they have questions. But I'm just going to comment on the last one about the microflows, and that's just really good advice for anyone. I don't care who you are, to be able to not bite too much off, because then we go beating ourselves up. Whether you're going on a diet or you want to start an exercise or you want to give more time to yourself or you want to be neater or you want to start cooking. I mean, no, I don't care what it is. We all have goals in our lives, but just take baby steps. And then I love that Monday reset. Just you reset. It's a new week. Don't look at the last week and say, oh, I didn't get that much me time, but set your goals. that is fabulous. And I can't wait to finally get your book because it's available now, because I'm going to be using that inner, middle, and outer circle. Because I think everyone, Sherri, you're right. Everyone should be aware of who's in their circles.
Yeah.
And just to go through the process of writing it down, it makes you more appreciative. It makes you think about it. And we had questions from the audience at registration. What if I don't have a go-to person that can help me with caregiving, that I need a break? Maybe doing that exercise might make you realize who is your go-to, or maybe you need to define someone that could be. Maybe it's a brother that you haven't been that close to, and maybe, establishing that. I just think
Or
it's,
maybe it's a professional, maybe it's a faith-based person that you put in your circle that you can talk to, or maybe it's through your employer. A lot of employers now have support for employees who are caregiving. So maybe you put that in the circle as something to tap into to help you out. But it really helps you crystallize where you are at and who's really there for you.
and it does. It just makes you think through the process, because at the beginning of this presentation, you talked about balance, healthier and happier, and who's really in balance. And I agree with you. If someone said I am completely in balance, I think I would question that, because we have
I
so
would
much
say,
going
send me your secrets.
on. Yes, send me your secrets. You're eating a lot of rainbows. But I really think that balance is just so important. And one takeaway today that, boy, I'm going to share with everyone, because I took care of my father. I didn't physically take care of him. He was at Kensington Senior Living, but I was his advocate and I was his caregiver for 10 years with Alzheimer's. And now I'm going down the same journey, not with Alzheimer's, but my mother is older and needs help. But I can't believe 50% of our community is dehydrated.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just do that math. How much do you weigh times how many ounces? I mean, just do the math, and that gives you a guide of what you should be drinking. And I didn't realize that dehydration can cause so many brain disorders.
Everything from headaches to angina to asthma to joint pain and certainly cognition. We are dehydrated and we don't even realize it. So,
Well, I love that. And the other thing, that I will never visit New York again without looking at Central Park in a different light. I didn't realize that. And isn't that we should really look at our history and start redefining what's important? I love
yeah.
that. I don't care who you are, if you're a factory worker or you own the Empire State Building, you're all going to enjoy this outdoor lush and this beautiful environment of ours.
Yeah.
I just loved your visuals. I mean, I'm just really super impressed with your presentation, and how you
Thank
just
you.
dive deep into a definition of a caregiver. And you and I had a long conversation of that ages
Yeah.
ago, where
Yeah.
I said, a caregiver is such a broad term. And
Yeah.
you can be a care partner, you can be a caregiver, you can be taking care of someone, but not physically. And the story I shared with you was when my dad was diagnosed, and Alzheimer's was 10 years ago. I couldn't even pronounce it, but I called my best friend and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know anything about this disease. And she didn't realize it. And at the time I didn't realize it, but I had just brought her in as a part of my caregiving, or,
Mhm.
because I was leaning on her to care for me emotionally, spiritually, sometimes physically when I barely could eat. But oh,
Yeah,
thank you
and
for that.
I think it's important because I think again we think of the words like caregiving and caregiver and we think it's like a task and we don't recognize it's about relationships. And we have caring relationships. They're just in different phases and intensity, let's say, throughout our lives. And if we can reframe it, that helps us a little bit to also plan ahead for our older loved ones that we know we're going to still care for, right? Just like we love them, we care for them.
I could not agree more. And I think the more that we can communicate and even share your inner, middle, and outer circle, as difficult as that might be, when you go, oh, actually, David's not in my inner circle. Maybe he's in my
Right.
middle circle. As difficult as that process might be, it might really allow you to reset on Monday about what's important and who's
Yeah.
important. I think it's I think
I
it's
had a lot of people in my workshop because I use that social convoy graphic in my workshop, and I had a lot of people come back to me after that one particular hour that we did and said, I'm more realistic now about like what my brother will do. I realize I was thinking he should step up, but he never has. And once I put it on paper, it calmed me down. I wasn't mad at him anymore. I just realized he's not going to be part of that inner circle. So
and by the way, that actually happened with me. I hope my brother's not watching, but my brother who lived in a different state, and that's one of our questions actually, but my brother who lived in a different state, I was like, you need to step it up here.
right,
And, he lives on a farm, he's self-sustained, he has a wonderful family. He's a farmer. And
right,
finally I said, that's never going to happen.
yeah,
He actually can't just at the drop of a hat come out here and support me. So I said to him, about every 6 months, I'll probably yell at you, but I love you. And
right.
I set the expectation to be real, and it just helped our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can use people again in different ways. Like sometimes it's not oh, you're going to step in and take over my role as caregiver, when I need a break. Maybe it's more of you're just going to be there so I can vent about something that happened today that really upset me?
Exactly. And if you can define that, and someone just chimed in and wanted a real quick description of you of the inner, middle, and outer. If you could just define that for them really quick.
Sure. So the inner circle is, I would say, it's the person or people that you can call at 3 a.m. So things happen, it's an emergency. That's the person you're going to call. Now, it might be the person you're sleeping next to, which is you don't need to make the call, but it really crystallizes for you. Those are the people that you turn to first. The outer circle are more people who want to help you, want to be there for you, that you might be able to tap here or there for small things or help give you a break or whatever it is. And the outer circle, I would think of as a little bit more of they're there for you, but not all the time. And maybe there's only certain things they can do or certain restrictions, like you said, the long distance, or it's a personality thing where, they just don't want to do that, but they can do this. But again, thinking about those three circles is really what creates your convoy in life. And sometimes people in the third outer circle have a specific function. It's to make you laugh. That you have a funny friend that you can call and they will find the humor in anything versus the person you can call at 3 a.m., right? So that's kind of how you think about those three circles.
And that attendee also said that, I don't know if it's a he or she, but that they had asked for help this week and was really surprised who stepped up.
Right.
So that's a good way to help you define your inner, middle, and outer circle. And now when I go to the grocery store and run into friends, I'm going to be like, middle,
Yes.
you're an inner.
Yeah.
I love that.
You're a number two.
Yeah, I love the 3 a.m. Well, and here's a question. What are best ways to manage caregiving aspects when you live in a different state from your aging parent?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So there's a couple of things I can say. First of all, the long distance caregivers, it's a big challenge, right? Because you're probably flying in or visiting with your loved ones for holidays or a special occasion, which means everybody's got their happy face on. You're not even seeing maybe some red flags and warning signs. So what I say to long distance caregivers is a couple things. One is you have to create your social convoy, but that will become kind of your eyes and ears on the ground where your loved one lives. And then also you have to tap into some experts. So what I mean by that is make friends with the neighbors, know who they are. Neighbors are nosy and they're going to say, your mom's run into the trash can every time she pulls into the driveway. And all of a sudden now you've got this, oh my gosh, mom's driving might be an issue, right? So you'll learn little things, but also the friends that they have, maybe attend with them, go into a social, senior center or a social event, or talk to their doctor, go to a doctor's appointment with them so the doctor knows who you are. Those things are all really critical. So you want to spend a little extra time beyond just the typical celebration, holiday, whatever. The second thing is you want to get an expert. Now, some employers actually offer, if you're still working, they offer the tapping into a network of geriatric care managers who can actually meet with your loved one, do an assessment of their home, kind of take a look at activities of daily living and do a care plan. But if not, there are some experts that you can talk talk to that can help you discern what's going on. And then maybe together, then you can talk with your parent about, okay, here's some things I'm concerned about. How do we work on this together? As you said, being a care partner, being an advocate, rather than, okay, mom, you can't drive anymore. You can't just cut people off from, independence and joy. We have to help come up with a solution. We may just have to adapt. And that's one of the themes in my book. As we age, we don't have to abandon anything that we love doing for the most part. We just have to adapt how we do it.
I love that you said, create your circle there,
Yeah.
the neighbor, the doctor, do it all up front and be a
Yep.
little proactive on managing someone from another state rather than winging it, I think.
Yep. Right.
Um, how do I get my dad to let me help him?
That's a great one. And I've even struggled with this myself with my mom, because if it's our parent, we're always going to be the child. And as a parent, one of the things that we know happens with aging from a psychological standpoint is, we start to feel maybe a little less relevant, like people aren't listening to us anymore, or we're not in tune with the times, or we can't still give advice to our, adult son or daughter, or whatever it is. And so we really have to put ourselves in their shoes and be empathetic. They're looking back over their life, the legacy that they left. Are they still relevant? Do people still listen to them? And so again, I think it's communication techniques. It's coming up with a way to say, I know that this might be happening, but how do we do this together? Let me just tell you a quick story. My mom's hearing, she really went deaf in one ear about 7 years ago. Now, I initially, immediately went to we got to think about hearing aids, mama. Oh, yeah, no, we're not doing that. I have a short hairdo and I don't want anyone to see the hearing aid in my ear. And so I'm like, but it's not safe. And I'm thinking more about your health and all that. One thing I realized after a couple years of trying to, get my mom to an audiologist is that she needs to learn things on her own. And so I started sending her research articles. And one of the research articles I sent her was that when you have hearing loss that you don't manage with hearing aids, you are going to put yourself at risk for dementia and Alzheimer's. Bingo. That was all it took, because she read that article and then, had to digest it. And a couple of weeks later, she said to me, I'm very concerned about my hearing loss, and maybe it is the right time to look at these. And I said, well, if you need me to do any research, or because I have some, obviously, some contacts and resources and stuff. So but that was knowing my mom wasn't going to listen to it from me, but
Right.
she would read something that I sent her and come to it on her own.
So it was a
That
third
worked.
party source that yes, I agree. I actually the same thing happened with my mom. I knew she shouldn't be driving anymore. And when
Mhm.
I brought it up, like, mom, I think it's time. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
oh
don't
my
want to
gosh,
have that conversation.
like this. And so I actually talked to her doctor about it. And I said, what do you think?
Yeah.
And he said, your mom shouldn't be driving. And I said, could you have that conversation with her? And he said, it's just not safe for you to be
And
driving.
you did absolutely right thing, because the studies show that, particularly in driving, that older adults would rather hear it from a spouse or from their doctor before their son or daughter.
That was 100%. When would someone know? I mean, I know it was a very difficult decision for me, but when would someone know that it's really time to look at some type of senior community?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things at play here. One is just the typical activities of daily living. Is your loved one able to dress themselves, feed themselves, all of those types of things, and manage their medications? 40% of people who go into assisted living, one survey showed, it's because they can't manage their medications correctly and they need that help. So there's the physical part of this. I think in memory care, it's where your loved one gets to a stage in the disease where we are not nurses as family members, and you really want to keep them safe. If they're forgetting to eat, they're forgetting to drink water and hydrate, you really have to have somebody who has that training and understands that disease to really help them. So that's more of the physical side. There's also the social side. As I mentioned, the social aspect of our lives is probably the number one factor in living longer. And if you have a loved one who's lost a spouse that they were married to for many years and they're living alone and they're just watching television and not socializing and not getting out and interacting, then maybe a senior community is a great place for them where they can have peers and friends and be in a lovely environment and they don't have to do the laundry or their the things that we all have to do to maintain a home. That might be the other side of how you look at it.
I couldn't agree more. I was against, it's not a secret, I was against moving my dad anywhere. And we did it because of the safety. And we also did it, it was causing so much stress on my mother. I didn't want to lose both my parents to Alzheimer's. But we moved my dad to Kensington and my mother was happier. My dad was happier. Everybody was happier. And it really gave them back any type of relationship that they had with this, dreadful disease.
Well, I think, can I just make one other comment too, Susan? I think as children, as adult children, we feel like we failed if we can't help our loved ones stay at home, which is usually the dream that they express. I want to
Exactly.
stay at home as long as possible. So we feel like we failed. But on the other hand, you don't abandon your loved one once they move into a senior center. You can still go see them every day or whatever you want to do. So you still have the relationship. It's just that the environment and the location has changed. That's it,
No, it took the struggle out of the relationship. I'm telling you, it was better for everybody, especially for me, because of the guilt. And
Yeah.
we didn't talk about that. That's another webinar, but
Yeah.
the guilt of bringing in music and bringing in all those things to making sure that my dad had that.
Right.
So, well, audience, I can't thank you enough. And I can't, Sherri, what a fabulous
Well,
presentation.
thank you for
And
having me.
I encourage everyone to share this with friends and family. I don't know a soul on this earth. I don't care if you're a caregiver or not, that wouldn't benefit from everything that you said. It's just better for life. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
It really helps. Again, if we think about balance, very often some of us might be really great at the physical or the emotional, or the social aspect of wellness, but what about the spiritual? What about the intellectual? So it's really makes you think a little bit more about all these aspects of life. And
Well, thank you.
yes, it's
And
all in here.
everyone, please have a wonderful evening or afternoon. And Sherri, again, thank you from Kensington Senior Living.
Thank you, everybody.